From the city of Peaky Blinders, Birmingham, England, I would like to introduce you to Paddy Danda.
As the world becomes more automated and the robots take over, it's imperative that we build the right human skills for the future. So pull up a chair, grab a samosa or two, and make yourself very uncomfortable. Hey folks, thank you for joining another episode of the Superpower School podcast. I'm Paddy Danda, your host, and today I have a guest who has a strong background in the entertainment industry, but what he does now is very different. He's a leadership and development facilitator, and he's just written a new book called The Missing Piece. So we're going to get into all of that throughout the next two episodes. So without further ado, hey Dean, welcome to the show.
Hi, Patty. It's great to be here. Thanks.
So, Dean, I'd love to know about your background. I know we briefly chatted before we kicked off the episode about your background, and you mentioned, you're a veteran of the entertainment industry. So, would you like to share a few thoughts about your journey throughout that time?
Sure. And I'll even go back a little further than that. I think it helps sort of gain an understanding of how I ended up doing what I'm doing now. When I was in my early 20s, I was finishing up school, and I was attending a great university. I had things that were lined up for me. It seemed like I was on a perfect track for success, but seemed like something was missing in my life. And I remember I was going on I'm an avid skier. I ski every year. I've skied every year since I was 4. And I was going on a ski trip with somebody. We had a long drive to get there, and he had just finished a program that in today's vernacular would be considered an emotional intelligence training. It was a company called LifeSpring, and it just seemed like the perfect thing that I had been looking for. And in that program, I learned so much about human connection, so much about the parts of myself that I had shut down. And so I was going through life and being successful, but I wasn't really allowing myself to experience the highs or the lows. I was just kind of numb. And I finished that program. I went to work in public accounting for 7.5 years, CPA by training, and realized that wasn't really the right culture. And I didn't use the word culture back then because I didn't understand what culture was. I just knew that it just didn't feel right. I didn't feel like I was able to thrive in that environment. And so I left there and went to work for a small recreational industrial products company, which really allowed me to work with a small team, learned all the ins and outs of the business, and gave me the confidence that I could go into any company and really add value, because I understood from the inside looking out what was available, as opposed to in public accounting being on the outside looking into organizations, not knowing how much I was missing. And luckily, I had a friend who had his foot in the door at the Walt Disney Company. And I had to go in through the audit department, which I wasn't thrilled about because I thought I had left audit in my past. But they had a track record of placing people in the business units within a year or 2 years. And 8 months later, after I got in the audit department, my counterpart, who was doing all the audits on the studio side, heard about a position that was available. And he went to our boss, and our boss thought I was a better fit. So the boss recommended me. So I went on an interview. I was hired on the spot, and my new boss basically launched me into my entertainment career, because suddenly I was the director of finance in motion picture marketing, working with creative executives, people in creative media, digital assets, to the degree we had them at that point in time. My whole world changed. I was no longer dealing with finance people and accounting people. I was dealing with people who were very right brain oriented. And I had to really tap into all those human connection skills that I had learned way back in my early 20s to create a relationship with these people. Because if I'd come in there and just tried to be the finance police, it never would have worked. They wouldn't have given me the time of day. And I was able to thrive in that environment and work my way up and became the CFO of the film studio. Wow. Chief Financial Officer. So I was there at Disney I was there at Disney for 11 years. And then as I got closer and closer to the top, this were the days of the Michael Eisner era, I realized that it wasn't Disneyland may be the happiest place on earth, but the inside of the company was not. And I had people who were lying to my face every day, trying to get inside information about through the back door of my organization, our area, so that they could manipulate what we were doing without me knowing. And without going into all those details, the point was I had to be different in order to survive in that culture. And when I don't know about most people, I can't flip a switch and compartmentalize like that. And I crept into my relationship with my family, the way that I had to be, the defensive side, the suspicious side, all those things. And it was not the place for me to be. And luckily, at that point, a counterpart was leaving another studio and he told his bosses about me and they plucked me out of Disney and brought me over to Fox. And I spent 17 years at Fox. And the good news and bad news about Fox is they were very entrepreneurial. So that meant we didn't have a lot of infrastructure and support. You had to do things by grassroots efforts. But the good news was I could jump in and participate in almost any area that I wanted to. So I ended up working with HR, realizing that there were really smart people at Fox, but not necessarily people that were taught how to lead. Most companies will assume that people will learn leadership through osmosis. They don't teach leadership. And so while they were really smart, while they didn't have bad intentions, they wanted to work well together, but they were just stepping all over each other. So we started doing some leadership training. And while I was there, I developed with HR a leadership development program that really was an accumulation of all of the things that I had learned in the prior 15 years, and developed a program that we called the High Potential Program while I was at Fox. And we brought in middle managers and directors. And I started out really just with 4 or 5 people talking about life, company strategy, just sharing anything, just to help create a better relationship with those people. Managers and directors in finance is how I started. And then it became more and more formal over time. We had presentations at the end of those programs that were initially just kind of putting our toe in the water to see, just sort of through a fresh set of eyes, what opportunities do we have in the company that we might be missing? But then HR came to me and said, it's not fair you're just doing this for finance. You need to do it for the whole studio. We launched the program formally as a 9-month program. And we started doing, first of all, we developed these people and created this cohesion amongst people that they didn't, the retention at the company went up by a lot with these people because nobody had ever invested in them like this before. They felt that they had a better understanding of the whole company. They were more strategic in their thinking, so the company won. And at the end of those projects that we did at the end got deeper and deeper into real issues that we were dealing with. Issues such as, should we start a brand management division so that theatrical, home entertainment, and TV distribution aren't all operating independently? What should we do as a data strategy for the organization? Big issues that usually, I should say, often led to an organizational change or a task force to further pursue an opportunity, and they really impacted the organization. And so when I left, you asked me, what I do, my journey. When I left there, I asked myself, I have a coach, and he said, I really want you to come up with a vision for you personally. And I've been talking about vision and those things with people for decades, but I really hadn't come up with my own personal one. I said, really, do I have to do that? And my vision was to do what I was doing at Fox that I love so much, the leadership and development, but to do it in places where it's completely embraced. Because even though we made a lot of progress at Fox, it wasn't fully embraced by the entire organization all the way to the top. And so now I go to organizations and I work with them, working in a program right now with a CEO, first-time CEO who I coached. He brought me in and we've been working with his senior leadership team. And he is saying the trust and collaboration amongst his team in 7 months has gotten far beyond where it would have gone in 2 years had we not done this program.
And Dean, just on that point, you mentioned there at Fox, you got so far and then people were resistant for you to continue. What was the reason for that?
It's funny because you had this tremendous level of trust, mutual respect, collaboration amongst the people in the program. And they're like, going, but what about the people up above us? They don't operate that way day to day. How do we deal with that? And the idea was at the top of the organization, it was more of a command and control type of leadership style. And so they were perfectly happy for everybody to work together, but they didn't necessarily come from that same place. They wanted the ideas, but they didn't know how to foster that environment. I don't think it's so much that they were against it. They didn't understand how to do it because you had people that had risen to the top that had really never learned that leadership. They'd never learned about collaborative leadership, how to inspire and get the best out of people, at least not from a way of creating a safe space. You know, there are so many people that are afraid to speak up and present ideas because they don't feel safe. And when you
Mm.
create that safe environment, the amount of creativity and innovation that flows in the room is phenomenal.
So do you think there was a resistance because they were slightly defensive, they didn't want to be exposed, or they just didn't want to change?
I think if you look at the subconscious side of it, what happens is people grow up in organizations and you're initially rewarded based on your individual performance.
Yeah.
And there's a belief and an expectation that the higher up in the company, the more you're supposed to know and you're supposed to have the answers. So people don't want to show any vulnerability and say that they don't have the answer. So th- there's a layering where if you imagine all knowledge and awareness, there's the things that I know I know. Okay, I know how to drive a car, and there's no doubt about that. There's the things that I don't know. There's things that I know that I don't know. I don't know how to fly an airplane. I know that. I have no interest in flying an airplane. There are the things that I don't know that I know. I learned over the years that I am pretty good at getting people together from opposite ends of behavioral spectrums and getting them to work together effectively. And people pointed that out to me, and I didn't realize it was a strength of mine until people pointed it out. So I have things that I know that I don't really even know that I know. But then there's the dangerous place, which is I don't know that I don't know. So the people that move up in these leadership positions, they don't really know the answers sometimes. They don't know that they know the answers. And they basically, I don't know that I don't know translates into I think I know, but I really don't. And they don't want to have that perception that they don't know the answer. So they're operating from that place that they've got it handled and just follow their instructions and everything will be fine. And that's where they're not tapping into the resources of the group. And that's where these people who understand collaborative leadership, who understand the value of that, don't understand why they won't foster collaboration.
That totally resonates with me. I mean, again, we were talking just before the episode, and I was explaining how my field is agile and agility. And sometimes when I'm running training courses for teams, I'll talk a lot about the leadership style that's needed for teams to be successful in an agile environment. And we talk about servant leadership. We talked about collaborative leadership, as you mentioned. And 9 times out of 10, people turn around and they say, yeah, but our leaders are nothing like that.
Yeah.
And in my head, I'm thinking, oh dear, because these 2 days we've invested in training you guys, part of it is a waste because for them to be really successful, they need that support from the leadership because you
Right.
can only go so far as a team before you need some additional support from that leadership. And if they don't have the right attitude, you're going to get demotivated and those teams will probably hit their heads against a brick wall.
I mean, we did that leadership program at Fox for 15 years. So we had a lot of people go through that program. So we had planted these seeds of synergy, as somebody said to me once upon a time. And
Right.
then when the studio really had to start shifting, when streaming came along and we really had to start competing with the Netflixes of the world. And it wasn't just about being able to control a theatrical launch and control your own success that way. Things had to shift. We had to have more collaboration between divisions. And when our new chairman came in, she wanted that to happen. We were able to activate those people that had been through the program and say, this is your time now. Now, senior leadership understands that we have to be much more collaborative. We have to bring the best ideas to the table. We have to have the healthy debate, as she called it, in order to come up with the best solution possible. So we were planting seeds, and that's why I did focus on the managers and directors. Because the first time they're leading teams, they don't have all these fixed, ingrained ways of the way it's supposed to be. and they're like sponges in the program, and they're learning all this stuff about how to foster that kind of creativity and innovation. And they don't want, and what the nice thing about doing a program for 9 months is it gets built into their day to day. If you go to a weekend workshop, you learn some great things, but usually the first time we're back in crisis, those things go right out the window and go right back to our old behaviors. But after 9 months, these people couldn't turn off what they had learned.
Wow, that's amazing. And I guess the entertainment industry is probably one of the most disrupted. Like you mentioned, Netflix and just streaming, that whole approach has really disrupted things. And then there's the whole debate about, Napster, especially with the music
I
sort
was
of
just going to say it all
download.
started with music.
Yeah. And so that whole area, I guess people had to shift very quickly and, flex their thinking. Otherwise, if they'd continued down that fixed mindset, they would have gone under pretty quick. Blockbuster, that a perfect example.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, the bandwidth issues on the internet uh, made music a perfect target because you didn't need as much bandwidth. And we knew that there would be a day when you could stream a movie or download a movie in a couple of minutes, so that we had to be prepared for it. But there was still a belief that because of the launch and awareness that we create with a movie, that we were untouchable to a degree. If you didn't release it in the theaters, how would anybody possibly be able to create that kind of awareness? But nobody anticipated something like the recommendation engines they have on these streaming platforms, because that's creating a heck of a lot of awareness in and of itself. So the bandwidth gave us more time to react. I'm not sure as an industry we did as much as we could have. I guess if we had had the foresight, we would have bought Netflix or created our own Netflix way back then.
yeah, as Blockbuster had the opportunity, but they
Yes,
turned them down at one point,
they
right?
did.
So
Yeah, exactly.
So then you talk there about that sort of journey, and you've come from this accounting background all the way through to becoming this leadership development specialist. That's a huge change. And I guess just tell me about your thought process there as you were going through that thought process of switching direction. Because accountants study hard, right? You've got to do a lot of exams. There's a huge amount of investment that you make as an individual.
Sure,
But then
sure.
to switch direction totally, I mean, that must have been a tough decision.
Yeah, it's funny because I can recount the process two different ways. I could easily look at it and say, I just sort of stumbled my way along, sometimes was in the right place at the right time and things happened. But I said in the beginning that I didn't use the word culture back then, but culture was a big driver for me. The leadership had changed. I worked for Ernst, it was Ernst and Winnie at the time. It's now Ernst EY. And in our office, the culture shifted. New leadership came in after I'd been there for, I guess, 5, 6 years. And it just didn't feel the same. They were changing. I had this vision of what it would be like to be a lifelong partner. And I had anticipated being in the firm forever. But something shifted and they wanted partners to change the way that they were. You had to be all things. So you had to be a technical specialist, you had to bring in all the business, you had to do this, that, and the other. And and there's a backstory here too, which my father was a big partner in Ernst and passed away when I was 13 years old. And there were different dynamics going on because of who I was and who he had been. And I don't know what it was, but it just didn't feel right. It felt like no matter what I did, it wasn't appreciated. And so it felt like it was a futile process for me. That combined with the fact that being on the outside of a company doing an audit felt like I was on the outside looking in, and I really wanted to be part of a team that would generate value over a longer period of time. And so I actually left and went to work. The company was Anthony Industries. They hired me, and there were several Ernst alumni there. So I knew the people. They took me under their wing. They taught me how to create value in a smaller enterprise. And like I said, I learned a lot of different things from cash flow to, we were just getting started on the personal computers back then. I've been around a while. I learned how to build a pool better, cheaper, faster, how to deal with legal liability for people that dive off diving boards and break their necks. if they've been drinking, all the different liability issues that go around that. So I really learned how to see how all the pieces fit together. And so when I went to Disney, I was much more comfortable that no matter where I went in the organization, ultimately I'd be able to add value. And again, when I went into the marketing department, was able to deal with those creative execs because I had the tool set. It seemed like I was constantly looking for a culture that where I could thrive. And I keep going back to culture every time. I left Ernst because of the culture. I left Anthony because we had a COO of the organization that really just made life somewhat miserable on an ongoing basis, especially as our growth curve was leveling out. And I just felt like that wasn't the right. That combined with the fact that the pool business, we were getting beat up by a lot of smaller pool companies that were hiring subs, and we were part of a corporate enterprise. So warranty work and insurance was costing us much more than the smaller guys. So we were having trouble competing. And I mean, I grew up in Los Angeles. I never thought about working in Hollywood. And then, like I said, all of a sudden I was a studio guy. So I wasn't looking to be a studio guy. I was just looking for an opportunity to add value in a different way. And what Michael Eisner and Frank Wells had done in terms of building the brands at Disney, taking the intellectual property and that had been sort of in remission, I guess, and bringing it out and doing so many things with it was exciting. And I got in the theatrical business and we were launching a movie every 2 weeks for a while. So it wasn't boring. It was never boring. Um, but ultimately it was the culture that caused me to make the moves. That culture at the top of Disney under Michael Eisner was the real catalyst for me moving to Fox. Once again, it was the culture. And I knew the first day at Fox it was different when my boss came into my office, gave me a big hug, and said, "You're the CFO. You can go to any meeting you want. You can get involved in any project you want. You do not need to ask permission." That was so counter to what Disney was like. So I guess I'd call it, well, I'm always in a search of personal self-discovery. I was always in a search of career discovery as well, and really culture discovery. How do I find that place where I can thrive? I've told people so many times in my career, if find a place where you can, a culture where you can thrive. If you can't thrive there, see what you can do to change it. But life is short, and if it doesn't work, then it's time for a move. Go find a place where you can thrive.
Oh, amazing. And just as you're talking there about your father, I mean, a saying popped into my head. They say sort of comparison is the greatest thief of happiness. And I think
Yeah,
we often, we're either compared or we compare ourselves to others around us. And actually, we don't appreciate everything that we have to offer, the uniqueness that we have. And we're constantly looking to almost relive other people's adventures when
yeah.
actually we've got more than enough of an adventure ourselves. But in your case, I can't even imagine how that must have been. I mean, especially to have a father so successful and then people having that expectation on you, right?
Well, and the expectation wasn't so bad. In full disclosure, there was one partner who somehow formed a belief, which is something I talk about a lot. We form beliefs and we think it's the truth, but it's just our belief. But he formed a belief that I was getting special treatment because of my father. But if you looked at the work that I was producing, I was actually at the top of my class. So it wasn't like I was getting special treatment, but he treated me that way. And so he wanted to frustrate me at every turn. And I just got old after a while. I said, I was trying to create different opportunities. I actually spent a year in the UK working for our office there because I had to get out of the LA office. I just had to get a change of environment to see if there was a way that I could thrive in the organization. And I did. I had a great experience in the UK, but then I came back to the Los Angeles office and it was as bad as ever for
Wow.
me. Maybe not the
Yeah,
culture for everybody, but for me, it wasn't the right fit.
got it. So, Dean, just like to finish off this episode, if you had to give your younger self sort of 2 or 3 bits of key advice, things that you would do differently, and you touched upon those a little bit about, you mentioned if you're not getting what you want in terms of that respect or the happiness, then look to move on.
It's easier said than done, but trust yourself. I mean, I had for various reasons, I had shut down those parts of myself I talked about early on.
Mhm.
And it literally changed my life getting back in touch with those parts of me. So I guess I'd say it this way. You can't please everybody all the time, so you better make sure you're happy with yourself. So what that means is be authentic, connect with people and embrace your imperfections. I mean, I tell people all the time, your imperfections are what make you unique. If everybody has the same skill set, it's what differentiates you from everybody else. And if people experience that side of you, they're probably going to connect with you at a deeper level. And so if I was talking to myself, that's what I would say is connect with people. Don't try to hide your imperfections. Don't try to be perfect. You're already perfect just like you are, even with your imperfections. So I think that's probably the biggest piece of advice I give myself.
Oh, brilliant. There are so many things that I think about where I'm flawed. Mathematics is totally not my subject at all. We were doing some financials recently at work, and I just turned around to my bosses and I said, I can't do this. This isn't me. And now everyone gets it. But ask me to doodle something, I'll doodle something
Yeah.
for you. Like creativity is my thing. I love that.
Really, the work that I do is to accelerate that experience so that we get more comfortable in our own skin, more
Yeah.
comfortable in the value that we can add faster. My whole goal is to have people learn the lessons much faster that took me a lot longer to learn.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much. That's great advice.